All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode, Springing into Football. Today we have the original crew for the most part. Raf, I kind of have to mention this every week, but is not here again. There was a chance that he could be, but wasn't able to make it today. We decided to get a feature here in honor of our last episode of the regular season. So, what better time to get fourth down and goal onto the show? Former feature, fourth down. We love to have you on our show. I think this is our second time. I could be wrong. We might have had you.
Mhm.
Okay, second time. But yeah, no. So what we do with our features, we introduce you, and if you can give us kind of like a background of what your page is. I know we might have had that in your previous episode, but we just like to give the viewers a little bit of a brush up, so that they could try to, so that you're just self promoting yourself basically, and you can, draw new followers. So if you can provide that to us, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you guys for having me. I'm really glad that we were finally able to make this happen. We were talking before we started recording, and we've been trying to get this going since I think mid-season, and it just hasn't really, the stars haven't really aligned for us yet. But yeah, just glad that we were finally able to get together and talk some ball. So for those of you guys listening who might not know, my name is Jeff. I run Fourth Down and Goal. My platform is kind of like a independent United Football League journalist slash podcast. This year, I wasn't really able to do a podcast. Just didn't really find myself having the time to sit down and record a whole lot. But I did try to do like some short 2-3 minute read articles, which you can find on my Instagram page at Fourth Down and Goal Pod, and then just tried to be somewhat of a presence on X, which you can also find. I believe it's the same handle. Um, but yeah, I mean, my stance on the United Football League is I kind of call myself UFL Switzerland because I'm pretty neutral as far as it goes, or as far as like having a favorite team goes. Like I don't really emotionally attach myself to any one specific team. I'm more just about, you know, um, just talking ball in general, and not really letting my opinions of like a team I might lean into um, as a favorite, potentially as a favorite, kind of distort my reality of what's going on with the league and all that. But I will be honest in that I do kind of lean into, for lack of better terms, if you want to say bandwagon. But to me, it's just when I see a good football team, that's the teams that I kind of like gravitate towards, and cover a little bit more intently. But I do try to give everybody some love in the league as a whole.
Yeah, no, well, it's truly easy to do that. We're still relatively small with only 8 teams. Obviously, we've kind of gone over a lot of our episodes, with potential expansion and probably, gonna happen. I'm not, yeah, I think it's gonna happen. Like, just the rumors we've seen, the confirmation and such. The expansion. We could probably get into that later, kind of just like a, end of season wrap up, if you will, kind of looking to expand next year. But we're gonna go ahead. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, Jeff.
Thank you.
We love to have you on here, like I mentioned earlier. And without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and kind of get into the framework of the episode. All right. All right. So yeah. So kind of just going over this previous week. So kind of like how we do week 10, just overall thoughts. Obviously, we saw a one-sided game, last game of the year between Birmingham and Memphis. Scorigami actually 49-9. I believe, I think it was only a Scorigami. It would be a golden Scorigami if it was in all the leagues collectively, like UFL, XFL, USFL, and NFL. But I think it was only a Scorigami. I'd have to double check on that. But regardless, what a game that was for the Stallions. They had a lot of standout performers. Some of them that we'll mention on later in the show. But besides that game, I mean, there were some close ones. Obviously, a lot of players resting up for potential playoff implications. Some of them just not out there for undisclosed reasons. What are you guys' thoughts kind of on this final week here as we kind of go into the playoffs? Is there anything that kind of changed your mind, like for some of those teams that are competing in the off season, or did the thoughts kind of just stay constant? What do you guys think?
I think looking at Saturday's game, Michigan versus Houston, even though that was a meaningless game for Michigan, I think that Houston kind of exploited those flaws a bit, which is how they played.
Hmm.
And, just especially defensively, they just kept pounding the stone. Rocky Lombardi couldn't really get anything going in his first start. And, it just goes to show that even though the Roughnecks are out of the playoffs, they still showed a lot of good fight. As we mentioned on the podcast, there have been a lot of standout players. I mean, Leon O'Neal, Jalen McClendon, Lorenzo Lingard. There's a lot of great talent in that team where it just shows the vast improvement and really just makes you question, is it enough to keep CJ Johnson's job safe? Because I mean, you have to argue too that they picked up Lionel Vital as their general manager in the offseason, which his improvements have already been shown. So like
Hmm.
just the jump from 1-9 to 5-5 is very noticeable. So I mean, it really just makes you question what's going to happen. But no, aside from that, I mean, it was a very solid week. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think the St. Louis and the Defenders game was probably my favorite just because of the mudslide.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of brought back some good memories to that Bears 49ers game in 2022. Um, but no, Stallions Memphis one was fun, but it's not going to be fun if you're like a casual viewer because you're just going to
Yeah,
think the league sucks.
yeah.
Um, but no, I think it was a solid way to end the regular season. Playoffs is going to get only interesting.
Yeah, and it's noteworthy also. Obviously, you brought up a lot of great talking points, but Michigan with 16,000 and plus and fans this past weekend, really something that we really wanted. Obviously, could have hoped for it a little earlier, but I mean, what can you do at this point? I'm still happy they drew that many, especially in a week 10 with a lot of their guys resting and not that many implications kind of so just leaving it out on the field kind of game, but nonetheless, I mean, still a great fan showing. I think like just visually looking at it, like from watching as a spectator, you can tell there was a lot more fans than just like your average 8 to 10,000 that we probably that we usually see during a week, whether that's with Michigan or another team. But the environment was definitely great, and obviously they didn't get to host, right? Is that just oh yeah, they didn't get to host the championship here for their conference, but I still think they can have some fans travel down there like they did last year. So, but um, but AJ, fourth down, what do you guys have? Kind of any Week 10 thoughts, things that might have stood out to you, or kind of going forward into the playoffs.
I was impressed by Birmingham and how they played.
Yeah.
Uh, um, I mean, going into this playoffs and having Jamar Smith at QB and the way he's played over the last few weeks, and Birmingham having a home game, and then Bryce Perkins not playing the last couple weeks, and now he may or may not play, but I'll assume he will play.
Hmm.
But even with that, you got a Birmingham team that's gaining momentum and a Michigan team that got to try to get momentum back. So um, I was impressed by what I saw, and it kind of changed my mindset on who I think might win, but we'll get to that later. But um, just a couple games that was somewhat meaningless, but like I said, Houston, I think CJ Johnson may have saved the job, but regardless, I think Houston made a good turnaround from where they started. And I think, for next season, they definitely have some highlights.
Hmm.
And I think if they can fill in those plug in some guys that can get them over the hump, they'll be good. But a good week heading into the playoffs. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Um, yeah. So kind of to touch on AJ's point, we did have a couple of meaningless games. It kind of felt like the last 2 weeks of the season didn't really have a whole lot of implications because once again we found ourselves in this situation where everything was kind of locked up by that point. But I will give the league, some credit for this year. I think it was still a little bit top heavy, but certainly not as top heavy as last year. Like what I think last year we were all basically locked up with like playoff seeding by like week 7 or 8, and I think this week or this season it was a little bit more of the same. But I think some teams like the Roughnecks, for example, made things a little bit more interesting, and whether that means CJ keeps his job or not, we'll see in the future. I mean, you kind of take a look at their schedule and see some of the teams they beat and the quality of wins that they had. I'm not super confident, but I mean, anything's possible. But it was nice to see, some of the third place and fourth place teams in the league. Well, I guess I should more so just say the third place teams in the league. We're hitting the 5-5, 500, win ratio. So that was nice to see. And then, I mean, I thought it was really cool to see Michigan Panthers fans show out for the last game of the season, even though the game didn't really have a whole lot on the line. It was just really cool to see, the city of Michigan or the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan show out to basically go watch a team of backups play. And, I think if they're able to secure Ford Field for next year, I just think that's going to mean even more growth for that fan base and getting more people in that building, which is obviously going to look a lot better on TV. And I think it's just going to keep growing because having lived in Michigan, I can confirm that it is a sports state 100%. And having been to a Michigan Panthers game back in the 2023 USFL days, and I think they were still pulling around like 9 or 10K. Just to see that number grow over the course of time has been really, really impressive, and I hope that they, take notes of that for other markets that are struggling. And then, as far as some of the other games, like Renegades, Brahmas, I mean, as far as the Brahmas goes, I feel like we were just kind of at the point where we were just old yellering the season with that poor team. You know what I mean? Just trying to get it over with. But I mean, Luis Perez looked good in his last start of the year. I really hope to see him back next year. My take on the overall coaching staff for the Renegades is I'm a little lukewarm on them at this point. That remains to be seen. There's some rumors floating around that Bob Stoops might not be back next year. But even if that is the case, I really hope we see Luis Perez, at least try and run it back one more year. I know we were saying that last year, but I hope to see him back next year because I feel like he's still playing at a very, very high level. And then, I mean, as far as Italian Showboats goes, dude, I mean, that was just an absolute butt kicking. Just an absolute demolishing of the boats. And it's to me, I mean, we can get into this later, of course, but like, I think the boogeyman is inevitable with Birmingham. I really do.
Yeah, no, I think, along the lines of what all of you guys said, really. I mean, just a great week of football. Obviously, not as great for some teams as others, but I mean that's because some of them are playing in in the postseason. So, I mean it's just kind of what it is. Getting this late in the year, you got to put your best product out there. You got to start looking for next season. Whether that's a job in the UFL again, or whether that's moving up another level to the NFL, or whether that's playing in the CFL. We saw a lot of our UFL players from last year go on to the CFL, and obviously other leagues too. So it's just really coming down to like what experience do you want to get out of it as a player, but also as a fan. Like if you were a fan watching from all these weeks, did you show up to a lot of games like when you had the chance? Like if you were that committed, that the commitment that some of us might have, or were you kind of just like watching in the background, kind of just like when the games were on? So it's just really a good time for a lot of people to kind of reflect and kind of see where they were at. So, but yeah, I totally agree with you guys. That was great. So So yeah, so this is kind of so this next segment. So we kind of talked about it briefly in the group chat. We're all gonna pick a team. It could be any team. I think fourth down, you kind of revealed who you wanted already, but okay, it's fine. So we'll go ahead and do that. So what you're just gonna do is you're just gonna pick a team, and then it can be from any conference. Out of 8 teams, we still have a good amount to go off of, and just kind of assess a letter grade based on the analysis that you provide. So whether that's they saw improvement from last year, whether they saw regressment, whatever the case is, just make sure you kind of provide lots of analysis just to kind of support your claim basically. So, but yeah, if who wants to start? I think we usually
I can start.
okay. Go ahead.
Um, so I was saying in the group chat I was gonna I was like, give me 5 minutes to verbally demolish the showboats, but yeah, I mean, going into the season, I'm actually gonna do a different team, but
Okay.
with the showboats, I mean, we just kind of saw regression to the mean as far as the showboat standard goes. Like I thought they would at least have been. I mean, they kind of were a scrappy team in some matchups, but I was expecting them to at least have some improvement, and it just didn't really happen. But I'm actually going to go with the St. Louis Battlehawks for my end of season analysis, and I'm going to give this team an A minus, just for compiling an 8-2 record after the amount of adversity they faced throughout the season, especially at the beginning with Manny Wilkins going down, and then of course, kind of as time went on, that defense just got hit with, and specifically the secondary just got taken out with so many injuries. Guys like Chris Payton-Jones. I'm pretty sure Brandon Sebastian went down earlier this year. Um, and just the way that they've been able to win, even if it's winning ugly, like I feel like Max Duggan almost got not like a bad rap, but like people are kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but they're just like not really on board the train yet, which is fair. But I also feel like, on the other hand, we have to kind of understand that in every sense of the phrase, this was Max Duggan's rookie year of professional football, and he went 5-0 in all of his starts. And that doesn't take away from the team around him. It's a team sport. Um, every piece has to work together to make that kind of thing happen. But if you look at this team, you know, outside of just their 8-2 record, which huge credit to their coaching staff and Anthony Beck for keeping this team, resilient and ready to go. Just from like a statistical standpoint, they ranked as, I believe, they were the number one rush offense in the league, which, I mean, kind of, that checks out when you have a guy like Max Duggan who's trying to like get his reps as the season's going on. You have to kind of lean on your run game, but they produced very, very well. And as a team defense, um, they finished the season second amongst the entire league, which I found very impressive, especially, considering how many injuries that they had, not just in that secondary, like I talked about earlier, but you also had guys like Austin Falu and Mike Rose have to miss a couple games. I'm pretty sure even Pita Kamapena, who ended up leading the league in sacks, missed a game here and there. So, it was just a really impressive outing. And, depending on how the playoffs go, um, you know, we'll see if they, you know, kind of keep steady with the trend of being that team in this league that kind of gets everyone hopes up and kind of lets them down in the playoffs. I'm hoping not, because just everything that this team has overcome this year has been truly impressive. I mean, I'm looking at their stats, and they're leading in so many categories, like even punt return yards, like Dacour Pearson, who didn't necessarily have a huge year receiving, still found his role on the team to help them, accomplish what they did. So I found myself really impressed with the St. Louis Battlehawks, and yeah, I'm gonna give them an A minus.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair rating. I think obviously, another big team, one of our biggest markets. Obviously, if they stay next year, I think we'll still continue to see a lot of growth, and obviously the team how the team's doing, you just want to see consistency because 8-2 is like, just try to run it back basically or better, right? But doing better is definitely a tall order. So, but no, I think A minus is a fair rating, and we've talked about them a lot over the course of the year. They've shown out week in week out, just like with their relentlessness, like you mentioned, and kind of their adaptability to different situations with different players. So yeah, no, I totally agree that's a good analysis for sure. But yeah, AJ Diego, if one of you guys wants to go, and then
I could start it off. I would pick the Stallions, but just just what we've talked about so far is kind of called Arlington
hmm
for me to analyze. And there was like a lot of ups and downs for the Renegades. They finished the season 5-5, but even though they're like a game out of like playoff contention in their division, like there was a lot that where they just did not look consistent. I mean, to begin the season, they looked great. They were undefeated for a bit. A lot of people really just set them as a dark horse candidate to make the championship, but just as it went along, injuries piled up, inconsistencies in coaching showed. Like Luis Perez, he's great. He's a spring king, as we all know it. But at the same time, he's had his share of mistakes as well. But I don't completely blame him. I think that really goes into like the coaching staff and what Bob Stoops tried to do to lead the team. And I mean, no matter what happens, I think that Bob Stoops is still a great coach. But almost as to what Jeff said earlier, is his job really secure? Because he did win the championship in the XFL in 2023, but aside from that, it's just been a very mixed bag for the Arlington Renegades since 2020. But like, what are they going to do? Is Luis Perez going to stay another year? Do you turn the ball over to Luke Lennon, who is still growing, very promising quarterback, starting his career? Just a lot of questions going on, just making you wonder what is the league going to do? What is Arlington's main mission for 2026? But if I had to give them a rating, I would probably give them a C minus. Just they were good at times, bad at times. Just a lot of questions for the Renegades.
yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I think it's definitely uncertain because they're one of those teams that's probably one of the older teams, and they have a lot of questions going into next year of who's staying, who's going to get NFL looks, who's going to possibly retire. Obviously they have Marquette King, who's also in his 30s as a punter. So they don't have like a team that you can really just look at and say, oh, well, all these guys are coming back. Like because obviously with where Stoops might be going, a lot of that stuff's gonna just be up in the air, just because of that, right? So there are a lot of factors, but yeah, I think going into next year, I mean that's kind of how it's been for the Renegades last year too. Is they kind of had to look at it like that. They gotta like, who's gonna be here next year? Like what pieces can we build around? So I think that's how they should look at it going into next year for sure, like you mentioned. So. But yeah, AJ, if you wanted to pick a team real quick, and then I'll go ahead and voice mine. Oh, you're muted. You're good.
I'll go with San Antonio Brahmas. Um,
This will be
they
fun.
yeah, they had a tough season. Um,
Yeah,
they ended up with 5 total passing touchdowns on the year, and it's 10 games. So technically, they average half a passing touchdown, which they can't. But
yeah,
I mean, they went from 7-3 last year and being in championship. This year they went 1-9. Uh, in my opinion, there aren't many bright spots other than Corbin and Anthony McFarland on special teams. And for a long time, destroying was scoring all their points in the games. And so, I mean, the offense didn't look great. The defense looked slightly better. And I mean, I give them a D plus. I think even Wade Phillips, he had his health issues or whatever he had going on this season. So I mean, they didn't have a consistent coach on the sideline. Their offense couldn't go. And looking at how they looked last year versus this year was just two totally different teams.
Yeah.
And so I think
Mhm.
for San Antonio, I mean, they got a lot of stuff they got to turn around. I think it should start at with the head coach, and they got to get some guys in there that can go win some games. But I mean, I'm gonna keep it a little light on San Antonio for the time. I could talk for probably 10 more minutes, but um, San Antonio they had a bad season. And it's disappointing just looking at how they was last season. And I had high hopes for Kellen Mond at the beginning of the year, and he squashed all of them by the end of the first game. So, for San Antonio, hopefully next year they can do a little bit better. Um, and but I'm gonna give them a D+ for this season.
I
Yeah,
had
no. Oh yeah,
a
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that I had kind of a thought while you guys were all talking. Ferris, did you get to go yet? Did you get to get a team grade? Because if not yet, I can
No,
wait on this.
no. I'm about to go right now, but you're good though.
I'll go ahead. I'll pose this question after you're done.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna rate the Houston Roughnecks. Obviously, we talked about him a little bit, AJ. I think we all have in some capacity here in this episode, but drastic improvement. I mean, hey, you went 1-9 last year. You were playing in that game for the number one overall pick, and you ended up picking number two. But this year, you're 5-5, and obviously you might say to yourself like, don't you want to at least be in draft position? But like when you had a 1-9 season and you're now 5-5, that's like I wouldn't even think about the draft if I was gonna improve that much. So I'm proud, like I'm just proud of them like as a UFL fan, because they did have a lot going for them. They did have a lot of talent, like just going into the season. Obviously, there were a lot of question marks with quarterback and kind of how that was going to pan out. And, was CJ Johnson, like, after the first couple of weeks, we thought he would be fired midseason. But I think he really turned it around. Not like he still has some flaws for sure, as a lot of coaches in this league do. But I think like the team definitely was on a better path in that second half of the year than they were in like maybe just the first 3 weeks. I think they kind of turned it around like in the fourth and fifth weeks. But I'd probably give them a rating of like, this is tough because I'll probably say a B-, just because they did have a lot of weak spots. Their offense didn't look that all too well a lot of the time, but they were able to do enough to just put up a decent season. And sometimes that's all you need for an older team, guys who are just trying to play possibly their last gasp of football, and that is the case for a lot of these guys. So I'll give them a B-. As for if CJ Johnson's going to be here next year, I'm not sure. You guys are probably in the same boat as me with that, but I think he definitely has a chance. Like if we looked at it like now versus week 3, I would say no, like absolutely not in week 3. But now I'm looking at it saying like maybe like 40-60, 40% yes, 60% no. That's my take. So, but yeah, Houston Roughnecks B-. So, but yeah,
Yeah, so
what were you gonna
that's a
say?
good. Yeah, I think that's a fair take on the Roughnecks. Um, so I was curious because you guys all chose teams that ended up missing the playoffs, and it kind of came to me while AJ was speaking on the Brahmas. Um, my thoughts on all these teams is like, kind of where do you go going into 2026? Because something that's really interesting about the Brahmas is that, their season with their staff was kind of in flux all year. And I feel like that kind of had an effect on their personnel management. We saw a lot of quarterback swapping, and I feel like to a degree we have to give Kellen Mond the same kind of patience that we're giving Max Duggan. This was pretty much his first year of professional football also. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. He did not look great. He looked pretty bad at times, as a matter of fact. Um, just you know, not not really producing the way that we thought he would. When it was announced that he was joining the United Football League. Um, and I feel like, for what it's worth, even though he didn't produce a lot of wins this year, I feel like if you're not going to bring back Wade Smith, um, excuse me, Wade Phillips, if you're not going to bring him back, do you consider Peyton Party? Because for what it's worth, like he definitely seems like a good leader of men. Like those clips that you saw on the sideline of him giving everybody hugs and telling him, "Hey man, I love you. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for being a part of this with us." During pregame for Week 10. I think that, to a degree at least, spoke to the players, and it'll be interesting to see if he ends up coming back. So I'm curious to know, like, at least with San Antonio, like, if you guys are in that situation, where do you go moving forward?
Well, I would say about that, I think it's a great point that you bring up about Payne Pardee. I think, I mean, I think you definitely have that discussion. I don't think you just rule them out completely, like how the Showboats will probably do with Jim Turner, or, well, that's probably the most notable example because C.J. Johnson will probably at least get a discussion at it too, because obviously his veteran experience also helps as a former coach. So I think, yeah, I would probably, if I could just give like a percentage split, like kind of how I did to C.J. Johnson, I'd probably give like a 45-55. I think he's like, I feel like it's kind of weird to say that he's above C.J. Johnson, but at the same time, I think he's done enough. So like I think he showed that they're probably like on the same wavelength of like leaders. I would say, like, just in the time that we saw both, because CJ obviously had that poor opening, couple weeks, but then Pardee really like just found a groove immediately, which makes it impressive. So I would say I would say 45-55. I would say there's a good chance that he could be back, but at the same time, with the direction the team is going, they've kind of always had the older guys as well. So, how does that kind of fit when Pardee might be the guy? So, I don't know. That was a great point though to bring up. But
Yeah, not
it,
to mention that, but I feel like once this year started, I mean, to your point about how they kind of like keeping, some of the older veterans on the team, I feel like that really, really affected their defensive
yeah,
output
yeah,
this year, for sure. And
yeah,
then kind
no,
of same thing too with the Renegades. Like, if Luis comes back, I think Bob Stoops is at least going to get offered that position back. Um, but I'm not really, I don't know, I'm not high on Bob Stoops as a spring football coach. I mean, yeah, he won the championship um, after Luis Perez came in, but I mean, he has yet to produce a season above 500. So I'm a little lukewarm on him returning. Um, and I think, if nothing else, like, I don't know. I think the if you can keep the defensive coordinator on board, I think you're looking all right on that side of the ball. But with what was his name, Chuck Long, just some of
yeah,
the in-game personnel management and play calling, and just overall, um, management from his side of things, I feel like that really held this team back and kind of shot them in the foot sometimes.
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up because, obviously, AJ talked about the Brahmas in detail, and Pardee is a great guy to just talk about because he did really some really good things for that team. So, but yeah, we're already at half an hour. I do wanna, well, we usually try to stay under like an hour 20 ish. So, but we can move it right along here if you guys don't mind. So,
Sure.
we talked a little bit about this earlier on, kind of about Michigan and their attendance record, kind of in the 16,000 range. I mean, we can get into this a little bit, but I mean, I don't even think we have to. I mean, I think we all agree that that market is great, it's fantastic, and if they can, re-entertain Ford Field
I
for
have one point that I want to bring up while we're on the
yeah,
lines of this really
yeah,
quick.
go ahead.
Just seeing them break 16,000 was fantastic. I mean, like I knew that they were gonna draw a large amount, but 16,000 was definitely a bit over than what I thought.
Yeah,
But no matter how you sugarcoat it, like you have to put pressure on all the other markets because you can kind of argue that the Panthers had a bit of help from Jake Bates' success from last year, and
hmm
just that just brings in not just Lions fans but fans from across the region. Just really just helping to let people know that the Michigan Panthers are playing. They produce great talent, and they're just a blast to watch for the spring. But that just really makes you question why isn't it working in like markets like Birmingham, Memphis, where else? San Antonio, like really just bringing in those familiar faces from college football or just players that may have not just panned out as they hoped to in the NFL. Just really, when you have a guy like Bates and it puts your league on the map, that just helps people know. And I know that Daryl Johnson touched up on this a bit at some point, but I do think that it is something that does help a bit. Um, and I could go on, but that's one thing I wanted to bring up.
yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think they kind of they like we anticipated like a certain number, and they definitely like blew that that expectation out of the water. And yeah, no, I'm definitely interested to see like if it does put pressure on on other competing markets because yes, it is a welcoming fan experience being at Ford Field, but what does that kind of do to the kind of the smaller stadiums or the smaller markets? What are you going to do when you got teams on one hand producing record-breaking numbers, and then you got teams on the other hand not doing not even in that same ballpark. So yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting for sure what Daryl Johnson might bring up here. So but yeah, we're gonna move it right along. I know a lot of us got to talk about that earlier on and kind of football kind of means and all other sports in Michigan. So this next point, Justin Hall breaks the single season receptions record with 62 catches. I'm not that informed of this one, but I think it's kind of just a point to talk about, like if he might get NFL looks. I know he was looked at by the Dolphins. I think it might have been 2 years ago, last year. I'm not. Yeah, I think he got a couple looks. He got a practice squad opportunity. I think from what we've heard, we'll talk about this in the next point after this, but the Roughnecks have gotten a lot of interest. C.J. Johnson's been in contact with a lot of NFL coaches, so I think Justin Hall will definitely be on a team for a camp, but then it just kind of will come down to if he's on a team for longer than that. So kind of like into the season, if you would. So, but what do you guys think? I mean, is that a good transition? Do you guys have anything to talk about with Justin Hall or individually, or you guys just want to kind of get into some of the players that just kind of stand out to you from the four teams that didn't make the playoffs? So, what do you guys think? Do you want to just get into the players?
I'll chime in really quick.
Okay.
Well, I just for everyone's information, I did add this topic on the list just because I thought it was worth noting. XFL analyst did post about it recently, and Justin Hall's 62 catches actually surpasses Ja'Cour Pearson's 60 catches from last year. So I just thought that was notable. And even though he may have had a bit of a down year statistically, he's still a very talented player that should definitely receive a look. Um, but yeah, no, I think that was a nice brief little segment. I think we can move it along here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
great season from Justin Hall.
Yeah,
Finished
for
finished
sure.
fourth in receiving yards, what is it, like third or fourth in touchdown receptions. 62 catches in a 10-game season is nothing to blow your nose at for sure. And I could be wrong about this, but I feel like he didn't make a All UFL team, which if that's not a snub, I don't know what is.
Yeah, no, I will. Well, that we'll get into that, but yeah, that is a good point. Obviously, we saw the other players that did make it, but yeah, no, I mean, you could see I mean, everybody could see an argument for why, for Justin Hall, why he didn't make it. So, but yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, just kind of going on that point. I mean, that's a great transition into this next one here. So, obviously, we have four teams that are officially eliminated. That some of them have been eliminated for a little bit now. You have the Showboats, the Brahmas, the Renegades, and the Roughnecks. So those four teams, all players starting today, were eligible to sign with NFL teams. Um, what do you guys think? You know, kind of some players from those teams. Anybody stand out to you? Obviously, we do anticipate seeing signings kind of starting to kick off here, possibly maybe in the next 24 hours. We'll probably start to see some tomorrow. I imagine today they're probably just putting in their first phone calls and meetings and things of that nature. So, what do you guys think? Kind of who has the best chance? It could be from any of those four teams, like we mentioned. So, what do you guys think?
I would say just Sean Corbin from San Antonio.
Oh yeah.
He led the league in rushing and had a pretty good season. I think he'll at least get a camp trial, and invite something like that.
Hmm.
Um, I think he could bring. There's plenty of teams that need depth,
Yeah.
uh, and I think a lot of times, unless it's special teams, they are there for depth. But I think he could definitely go to a team that a young team and add depth to the running back room and maybe work his way through the season and maybe get some playing time.
Yeah, and Jay Sean Corbin also only 24 years old, so really young player that can be adding very much needed depth for a lot of these not even RB needy teams in the NFL. Like AJ said, like a lot of these teams could just use another guy, and not even like as just a camp body. It could be much more of a use than that. So, but yeah, that's a great point about Jay Sean Corbin. I definitely agree with you there. So. Diego, fourth down. Any guys that kind of stand out to you from those four teams?
Yeah. Um, a few guys that stands out to me is Deneric Prince from the Memphis Showboats. Now, I know this team gets a lot of negativity. A lot of
Hmm.
people have a lot of concerns. Are they even going to be here in 2026? But I think Prince was a guy that was a bright spot. I think that he has some solid talent. He's a young player, not really a lot of people know about him, but I think that he could definitely be a guy who could at least be a nice fit for a camp. um, of course, two other names that I think are a bit more notable are Chris Rowland, of course, or wait, no,
No.
he's in the playoffs.
Yeah,
That's
there you
right.
go. You're good.
I'll just move on to my next guy. Damon Arnett from the Houston Roughnecks. Of course, he had a bit of
Hmm.
controversy. We've talked about it on the podcast before, but I think, he's had a good year. He's really just kept his eyes on the ball, really just staying out of trouble, really just starting to demonstrate like his class act a bit, which I think could definitely help a more needy team in the secondary a bit. But no, there's a lot of guys that, even though they may have been eliminated, they may have had one or two games to shine a bit. Shoot, you can even argue Jalen Shurden from the San Antonio Brahmas, who was on the Panthers for a good while. Good
Yeah.
while. I think he could maybe be a surprise signing as well.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of low-key forgot about that because we talked about him being on the Panthers so much, but we did find out that he was traded a couple of weeks ago. But so he's eligible to sign with the team, and I definitely see that too. I think he can definitely be signed by a team. He's also a young player in his low 20s. So, but yeah, fourth down. What do you got? You got any guys that stand out that just from those four teams?
Yeah, I thought Diego made a really great point with Damon Arnett. He's had a full career turnaround,
Mhm.
so it seems up to this point. Um, Off the top of my head, if it's not Justin Hall, I know Kiki Chisholm and
Yeah.
Lawrence Keys from the Roughnecks have also been, getting looks from NFL teams. I feel like, um, you know, kind of despite um, how we were saying with the Showboats, like just how much they struggled this year, I feel like Steel Chambers could get a look from a couple teams. Um, he's a really young guy. I believe this was his first year playing professional football at any level. I could be completely wrong about that. Correct me if I am, but yeah, man. In 10 games, he's third in total tackles and total defense throughout the league. And it's funny because Jordan Williams and Devontae Beckett from San Antonio, respectively, lead the league at the 1 and 2 spot with 78 and 77 tackles, but Steel Chambers is right there with 76, right behind them. And yeah, I mean, he was just a force to be reckoned with on a defense that otherwise really really struggled. So wouldn't be shocked to see him get a couple looks. Keba Tizino, I mean, he's in the playoffs, but I feel like he's kind of getting camp looks every year.
Yeah.
Uh, who else? Wanted to try and do an offensive player as well.
Yeah.
Uh, Sayosi Mariner. Well,
Oh,
he's in the
okay.
playoffs. He's
Yeah.
in the playoffs too, but um, yeah, or Sal Cannella. Sal Cannella, I feel like, is another guy that's kind of like bounced around NFL camps a lot and finds himself back with the US or back with the UFL, much to the appreciation of us as viewers every single year. But yeah, I mean, he's still out there producing really well on the field. Same with Jonathan Adams. Like I feel like that's another name that, especially this year, was finally getting the recognition that he deserved. So yeah, I mean, there's quite a handful of these guys who ended up on teams that didn't make the tournament that I still feel like would be well deserved to get a call from a few NFL camps going into the new NFL season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I agree with those names. Obviously, like we know, their teams had a rough season, but these NFL teams look at the individual player, not so much what the team did. Obviously, it kind of helps. I don't know if there's like a statistic on how many more players from playoff teams get signed versus teams that were in the playoffs, but we'll have to find that out at some time. But no, yeah, I think those are some great picks for sure. All names that we've mentioned very heavily here on the show. So, but yeah, for who I had, so obviously fourth down kind of mentioned that Houston's been getting a couple guys been getting some looks. Another guy was Mike Rivers that was associated with that rumor. Well, it wasn't a rumor. I think they kind of confirmed it. But Mike Rivers, punter for the Houston Roughnecks. That's one of those things like you definitely like can look at and say like that's definitely possible. Just come in and roll it right into a starting job because special teams has been the core of really who the UFL like what they've manufactured at the next level. That's not a bad thing, because they're all starters and obviously we've had three of them be Pro Bowlers and All Pros, and on that note, so it's just been like how can you come into the league and really manufacture it? Obviously, you're going to get a lot more time as a kicker one than you are as an RB2 or a wide receiver three. So that's my thought on Mike Rivers. I think he can definitely get to the NFL. I'm pretty sure he's a younger player. He might be in like that bridge range with like 28 to 30, but even then, teams could still look to pick him up. I think Brandon Aubrey was in that range when the Cowboys picked him up too. So it's never too late for an NFL tryout. So um, and then another guy that stood out to me was Tyler Vaughns. Obviously, being on the Renegades hurt him a little bit, but he still was able to manufacture a lot of success with Perez and that offense. Kind of a very filled wide receiver room, but I think he held his ground and really did a nice job this season, and I think teams could really look at him, whether that's for special teams or just another guy in camp that could potentially stand out just from a looks perspective and really make the 53 man come September. So, but yeah, those are just two guys that stood out to me for sure. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about, but in the essence of time, those are kind of our thoughts on who we had. Um, so yeah, we're kind of getting into the final segments here of the show. We're gonna go ahead. We can get into playoff predictions. So obviously, as an 8-team league, we only have two games in the conference championship weekend before we get to the ultimate one game. So obviously, we have the Michigan Panthers being hosted by the Birmingham Stallions at 3 p.m. Eastern Time this Saturday. And then followed by that, we have the DC Defenders being hosted by the St. Louis Battlehawks. That game, I believe, is at 6 p.m. Eastern. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, some really great football going to be played, and I'm just more interested to see kind of what goes on in these games. Me personally, like if I could just start it off, I don't know, I think this is going to be tough. I mean, historically, you give Birmingham the win. If you're just looking off, their history with Michigan, they've just never slipped up. They've always stayed strong. Even in the closest of games, I think they played two shootouts, so to speak, this season with them, and they still found a way to pull it off. So I think Birmingham's gonna win, get another championship appearance. What is that? Four? Yeah, four championship appearances if they get the win. But I think Birmingham's going to win again. And then as for the other game, I would say St. Louis is winning, but I think it's going to be definitely a hard-fought game. I think DC has a chance, but I think St. Louis at home will definitely come out firing on all cylinders. So I got final prediction: two teams in the championship. I got St. Louis from the XFL conference, and I got Birmingham from the USFL conference. So those are my picks. What do you guys got? Obviously, we have a lot less games than our typical week, so we can take a little bit more time on this one. What do you guys got?
I'll go. With Michigan and Birmingham, I do think it's going to be a close game,
Yeah.
and I do think Birmingham is hot. But I'm going to say Michigan's going to win.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
I think it's going to be really close. I just really like Bryce Perkins, and I'm
Yeah.
going to assume he's playing. And I think even though Birmingham has had their number, I think Michigan's going to win, and I think Bryce Perkins is going to run the ball a lot. And I think when I saw Birmingham versus St. Louis, I think Max Duggan didn't throw so well, but he was able to run. And
Yeah.
I think a guy who can kind of match that is Bryce Perkins. So I got Michigan winning that one. And then DC and St. Louis, I do think it's going to be a big crowd for St. Louis. Most of their home games are.
Hmm.
And I think both teams match up pretty good. I know last week didn't really count, but the first time they played was a good look. And I think they match up very well. And I think when I look at them, I put Max Duggan versus Jordan Teamu. And I think Jordan Teamu is going to outplay him. And I got DC winning. So I got Michigan and DC in the championship.
Michigan and DC, those were polar opposites of what I had, but again, you could spin it either way you want. Like just how close these games are going to be with with the players on both sides. I could see it the way you saw it for sure. Like if I just had definitely like a different mindset, I could definitely agree with what you were saying. Like, but just for my overall opinion, that's why it was different. But it'll be different for everybody in the UFL fan base. But fourth down, Diego, what do you guys got? Anything?
I'll start it off. Um, I think looking at the Michigan Birmingham game, kind of like what AJ said, I think that Bryce Perkins is going to play stupendously. I mean, we've seen that in the course of a few games, and just he's one guy. A lot of people have had as MVP for a while, but like not to hate on the Panthers Thunder, but I do think that I mean, you could argue with it's going to be scripted or something, but we're going to somehow come down with it, whether that's overtime, a fumble, an interception, maybe Daniel Isam again, like last year, whatever it may be. I think Stallions will probably win it. I'm going to assume it's probably going to go into like the 30s for this game. I think that it's going to be very close. And then going into the St. Louis and DC Defenders game, I think both of the teams are just gonna go completely off. I mean, you're gonna be in the dome. It's already gonna be a great atmosphere, probably around 30K, maybe a little lower just because it's on a Sunday night. But I do think that I'm gonna go St. Louis for this one. I do think that even though Max Duggan may still be a bit iffy on for some, but I do think that St. Louis will pull it off with the same adversity that they have just done this year, and then it's gonna be like a 40,000 attendance game for the championship. I mean, I can't deny DC's firepower though, so I wouldn't be surprised if they get the nod for the XFL side instead.
Yeah, no, I listen. Like I said, I see both opinions. Obviously AJ had different answers than us, but I can still see how you might spin it that way because the teams are just so good and it's so close that either way, it's going to be great this weekend. So, fourth down, what do you got? Kind of finish us off here.
Sure. Um, yeah, looking at these matchups and just like how these teams like kind of match up with each other, I feel to Diego's point, I feel like both of these games are going to be pretty high scoring, especially Michigan and Birmingham, considering that we're probably going to see Bryce Perkins back in the fold for the Panthers, and then I know that there's like some um, discourse about who's going to end up starting for Birmingham at quarterback because Matt Corral and Alex Magoo are coming off of IR going into the playoffs. So we've been told. Um, but at the end of the day, like I really feel like this has been Jamar's show ever since he stepped back in. The Stallions were winning, but there was no sense of consistency with them, even while they were putting up W's. And then, once they re-signed Jamar Smith, I mean, that offense just looked unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
And, you compile that with how injured the Michigan Panthers secondary has been in the latter half of the year. And honestly, to that point, just kind of like how bad that they've looked in that department.
Yeah.
I do think that we get a really high octane, high firepower game, but like I said, the boogeyman is inevitable, and I until proven otherwise, like I can't confidently bet against Skip Holtz, especially once he gets to the playoffs. Like it's just been bad luck for any person who's ever gone against them, going into the playoffs. They just always find a way to find themselves in the championship. So, much as I would love to see the Michigan Panthers, make the US or UFL championship, I do think we're going to get Birmingham 4 years in a row. And then for DC and St. Louis, I don't know, man. This is probably the one that's a little harder for me to choose. Just because like you look at both of these teams and how they fared down the stretch. St. Louis obviously wins the division and puts up an 8-2 record, but winning ugly in all of their matchups doing so. And I feel like at some point that run, your luck kind of runs out with that. And kind of to something that Diego said earlier as well, DC's offense just has not slowed down one bit, seemingly all season, it seems. And, it was that week 3 matchup that kind of put the Battlehawks defense, at least for the time, on notice. They did improve as the season, went on and they started to figure things out. But adjacent to that, like I said, the DC's offense just hasn't slowed down. You have Jordan Ta'amu with probably an MVP season, um, and I feel like their defense, while probably not necessarily a top half of the league unit, they've done enough to give the offense opportunities to go out and win games, or keep opposing offenses off of the field to let the offense produce. So yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one, but I think we're gonna get a rematch of that week one game between Birmingham and DC in the championship. And another thing I'm really curious to see, for both of these matchups, is how well the fan bases travel.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that take. Birmingham and DC. I think if DC gets through a tough St. Louis team, then I mean, whatever combination we get in the championship, I think it's gonna be interesting, like either way. So,
100%.
obviously, yeah, yeah. I mean, like obviously, you brought up week one because there were a lot of things that happened in that game, and obviously the teams for both have changed drastically since then. So it's only gonna, make for that much more of an interesting game if that's what happens. But yeah, no, I totally agree. Thank you guys so much for sharing your predictions. I mean, I think it's going to be another great weekend of football. Hopefully, we see great crowds, and before we get to the final game. I mean, it feels like we just saw, it felt like yesterday when we saw Alex Magoo play in that Week One opener against DC, and now we're on the brink of conference championship weekend. So. It's been a long time coming, but we're excited. So, but yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and get into our final regular season awards. This is actually our final awards of the year. So, over the year, we've kind of just gotten into weekly awards that we issue to our players, and obviously we've seen repeat winners. This week, we do have a couple. I'll go ahead and get it started. So. Um, Air Player of the Week, so Luis Perez for Arlington Renegades. He had a great game. He's had a great season. It's just the situation that he's in. Kind of puts him, in the doubtful category to return next year, or maybe not even doubtful, just questionable. Just to return next year with kind of all that's going over there in Arlington. Great player, great attitude, great character. If he was to return, we'd love him too, but. Again, none of this stuff is forced. We're not forcing him to come back, and he's got to do what's best for him and his family. And if that's not returning, then it's not returning. We don't have control over that. But Luis Perez, he's probably, if this is his last time winning the award, he's probably won this award like maybe 5 or 6 times. And
Mhm.
probably that's probably generous. That he's probably won it a little bit more than that even. So he's probably won it like 3 times alone this season. So. But I mean, like I said, great player, great energy. If he doesn't come back, then that's his decision. We're not gonna bash him on that, and neither should anybody that watches the league should. But Luis Perez, that's our Air Player of the Week for Week 10. So, um, but yeah, if anybody wants to get into these other awards here, the floor is yours.
I'll take Ground Player of the Week. Um, for this award, we awarded it to Jarveon Howard, who is a previous winner,
Yeah,
actually since week one. So
yeah,
it's actually kind of nice that he wins the very first week, and now he wins at the 10th week. But no, nonetheless, I think he had a solid game despite the conditions. He had one touchdown. He had a few decent carries, and no, I think when we were in the player and who signs, I think he was definitely another candidate that could for sure get a look. Like
yeah.
even though some of these players may get limited like plays or may not like make the big headlines, I think that Howard is definitely a dark horse to get signed with an NFL team this summer.
Yeah, no, I can see it for sure. Obviously, when you're RB2, it makes it that much more difficult. to kind of get looks and and action on the field. But no, I think he's definitely worthy of a potential look from some of the NFL teams. So, but yeah, um, fourth down, Jeff, AJ. We got four awards left here. So if everybody wants to kind of just take one from this point on, we can do that.
I'll
Uh,
go ahead.
Oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Go.
Um, I'll go to lockdown player of the week. Tay Crowder. He had a tackle and two interceptions that went for touchdowns. I don't know if I ever seen that before in a UFL game, but uh,
First time in history.
yeah. But I mean,
Yeah,
like I said, that Birmingham got a lot of momentum,
yeah,
and I know I said that and still chose Michigan, but they do have a lot of momentum. And Tay Crowder is one of those guys that have NFL experience. And so lockdown player of the week, and he's gonna be big coming up next week.
yeah. And that's one of the few times we've had a linebacker win that award. It's very rare for that to happen because we usually look for secondary to win it. But uh, two interceptions, both taken for a touchdown. We just couldn't count them out. So, but yeah, Jeff, what do you got here? You can kind of go out of order if you want.
I was gonna go ahead and just give Sal Cannella a little bit of love, just because he's been such a staple to spring football in general. It's a shame that after the season he put up, finishing, um, finishing sixth in total receiving yards, and I believe if I can get my computer to load, he's second. He's second in overall receptions, and to finish a year like this with only one touchdown on your record, on your stat sheet, is a little bit of a disappointment. But I mean, like when you factor in like just how much he was doing for his offense, um, like I said, he's just been such a staple of spring football for the last few years, and just continues to be like one of the staple players of the league, and um, yeah, just keeping consistent with the theme of his career.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like we said earlier on, definitely could get some pro looks and like a lot of these guys we're talking about. So, yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much for breaking down Sal Canelo there. So, we got two more left here. Let's see. How have we? No, it's gonna be uneven anyway. I'm just trying to see like how we. I mean, we can just do. I'll go ahead and take one of these. So Marvin Moody of Houston, um, really just another great week from him. Obviously, defense has had some struggles over the year, and they do have good players. I think he's one of them. It's great because he was with the Roughnecks last year. He finished with 28 total tackles on the season, and this year he finished with 65. So he definitely improved, and possibly another one of those guys. Being considering being on a team that's not in the postseason, could potentially get a look. So I'm excited for him. He also had an interception. I think was that this week? Okay, okay. So yeah, so the
it was the one for the pick six.
Okay, yeah, yeah, you're right. So the pick six, I kind of got focused on the season stats and not the week stats. But yeah, the pick six that he recorded, just made it like obviously we had Tay Crowder because the two pick sixes is better than one. Obviously, you don't get that very often, so we gave them the favor for lockdown player of the week, and then Marvin Moody, very deserving of our defensive player of the week. I believe first time winner as Tay Crowder also. I believe he is first time winner as well. So congratulations, they get their first win here before we wrapped up our regular season awards. So congrats to Marvin Moody for sure. And then we got our final
Um,
award here.
yeah, I'll take this final one. For our special teams player of the week, it's none other than Harrison Mevis or the kicker. I think aside from just this week, I think he's had a very good season. There's already a lot of hype going into this season when he got signed. But no, just looking at the way he played, he was for field goals, he was 20 to 21, which is the same statistic as Rodrigo Blankenship. And I think Rodrigo, I think what's his all-time long? 56, I think,
Yeah, yeah,
for his long. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
I know Mevis had 54, but I think, you know, Mevis has had attempts from longer distance. But, you know, if you had to name a guy other than Blankenship that has been really good for special teams, it's Harrison Mevis. And, you know, I think, you know, who knows what's going to happen. I think, you know, he's just that guy you want to have. He's reliable. I'm sure he will be reliable on extra points as well in the NFL. But no, he's just a great personality, and you know, big congrats to him and all of the other players for this final season awards.
Yep. I think Mevis might have won once. We got to go back and retrace that, but I think he won maybe one time this season because obviously he wasn't in the UFL last year, so I think yeah we'll have to go back. We can say that for a later time, but yeah, Harrison Mevis, final Special Teams Player of the Week award given to him. Congrats to all the players that won this week. Obviously, we have a lot of repeat winners, which is great. And yeah, we'll collaborate with all of you guys here once AJ finalizes that. He's worked very hard on all these videos all year, and we appreciate his time and commitment to that. So, but yeah, we'll make sure to collaborate with everybody, and also we'll probably have time since he's getting out tomorrow to mention all the players and to get them to tag them all. So, but yeah. So yeah, before we kind of get into the final closing thoughts here, um, I mean, we can just go ahead and get into it. I think it's been a great season, in my opinion. I think there's a lot to grow on. Like I'm not gonna just let the season play out and say like, oh, like we did everything right. There were so many things that I would have went back and did differently. Like if you were like from just the management perspective. But unfortunately, you can't get back. You can only go forward in time. So it's unfortunate. Like we definitely could have gotten better attendance ratings, and we could have gotten better play. And maybe those first couple weeks, we had on our show, we were talking about how like in that second half of the season, play just skyrocketed. It just came out of nowhere. Like there wasn't really a lead in or a transition, which kind of hurt us, in terms of attendance because, like you saw, like we saw, great numbers at the very end. Just wishing we could have seen that a little bit sooner. So, but those are my overall takes. I think just great season overall. I mean, nothing overly complaining about, but definitely some things to build on for next year for sure. What do you guys think?
And I'm right there with you. I feel like for every, you know, thing that for everything that the league kind of lacked in this year, I do feel like there was enough buzz for them to at least take notice. And, in some markets, you already see them making moves to correct things. Like I know that they're hiring some local guys to get fans out in the stands in Houston. I think they're trying to do the same thing in Memphis. And I know they did the same thing in Michigan, which we've seen be an incredible success. So, yeah, and I feel like they'll also learn a little bit from how they struggled a little bit in Birmingham this year with some of the attendance there. I don't think it's so much of a marketing issue out there as much as it was just scheduling this year. But, ratings were kind of up and down all year, but I feel like for the most part they were on par with last year. And yeah, just like I said, like anything that they lack this year, I feel like they've taken the initiative to take notice of to start moving the cogs of the machine to correct these things into 2026.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, kind of along the same lines, but kind of getting more into the some other teams that might not have seen the success that they were anticipating with Birmingham. Obviously, with how great of a team they have and kind of the city that they have, like just the fan base with the older crowd and then also the more millennial generation just coming out for their games. So, but yeah, AJ, Diego, just kind of some, just kind of like overall reflection of the year. What do you guys think?
I think, you know, I think the 2025 season has been a success. I think it was a great year for football, for some of the players, for some of the markets, as we touched up on. Um, but I wanted to side note the Friday night football slate. Um, the TV ratings for this game was reported to be about 670 thousand in ratings, which is actually the highest since week four. And I mean, you could argue about the Friday night slate, but I think it was nice to have, especially as a college student. And there's just a nice way to like unwind a bit. But even aside from that, I think that it was a great slate. I mean, you're gonna have those growing pains, but I thought it was fine. I mean, I could talk about the other TV ratings, but those aren't out yet, considering we were recording earlier than usual.
Mhm.
But I know that ABC has been a network that has stood out the most, aside from Fox, of course. But no, aside from ratings, I think 2025 presented a lot of ways, and of course, there's going to be a difference for the first year now that this league is just trying to stabilize itself. But no, I think when you just sum it up, I think that it was great. I'm glad we got to experience another, and I hope this playoff, these next 2 weeks are great, and let's start preparing for year three.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, we have expansion in the works, and we'll get into more details of that. Hopefully, we'll record some off-season coverage for you guys if that is to occur because that is a significant thing. Getting more teams is good, and it changes kind of our job because we have more things to do, and it makes it, I'll just say how it is, more difficult, right? Because we're watching more football every week and takes more time, but definitely not. It's definitely more exciting than it is than not. So, but yeah, AJ, what do you think of this season? I know you were big on a lot of stuff. You watched every week, and you watched a lot of these teams grow. And so, what did you think of the overall season?
Um, I mean, y'all covered a lot of it, so I'll keep it short. But I love to see the certain teams that improve, like Houston. Um, and the guys who have gotten better. Like I always say, I love to see the guys who get opportunities, and especially the guys who played last year, like Jordan Teamu. I was the person that said he shouldn't even be the starter this year, and now he put on a MVP caliber season. And Bryce Perkins doing the same, and so many other guys. But just happy to see all the guys who getting opportunities and playing, and even the guys who we weren't talking about in our first episode, who we talking about now. So just happy for the league to have another successful year and make it to playoffs again. And all I can say is just happy to watch football every week, and I'm excited for the playoffs. Ready to see who win.
Yep, not
Yeah,
even.
100%.
I mean, I know we're thinking a lot of us might be thinking about year three, but the playoffs are still on tap. So I mean, we're looking forward to those for now. So, but yeah, thank you guys so much for joining, AJ, Diego. Thank you guys so much. Fourth down, it was a pleasure having you. We'll
Pleasure
definitely
being here.
talk. We'll definitely talk about potential off-season coverage. If we'll get some, we always get some interesting talking points in the off-season with NFL camps, and now this year we have expansion going to be happening. So we'll definitely be in contact for a future episode.
I appreciate you guys having me on again. Like I said, glad we were able to make it happen this year. Glad we were able to do it at the end of what was a very successful year of spring football. Like we said, like we were talking about, just from like a pure from a league perspective, it had its struggles, but I do think from like just a pure ball perspective, like the talent level has gone up so much exponentially every single year, and I think the sky's the limit moving forward. So I'm glad to be doing this with you guys. Glad you guys think of me and inviting me on and giving me a platform to speak and talk ball with some guys that share the same passion and interest I do. It's a great time.
Yeah, no. Check out Fourth Down and Goals page on Instagram, and we'll be collaborating with him following the release of this episode. So check us out. Check Diego and AJ's pages out. Diego, Beham Stallions Nation, and then AJ, his main as well as his editing page, Breezy Films. Fourth Down and Goal. Obviously, they'll check out your page. The Fourth Down and Goal. You have podcasts, journalism, etc. So much to look at, and we'll definitely be in contact soon. Thank you guys so much for joining, and as always, enjoy these games before the year 3 off season period. So,
Thank you. Have a great night.
yep, everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Happy playoffs, y'all.
Yep, happy playoffs. See
Giddy
ya.
up.